The PURC has announced a 10 to 30% reduction in prices of electricity effective March 15, 2018. How realistic is this reduction? We have all the answers for you on PM Express tonight, live from the Africa Center for Energy Policy, ACEP, in Accra. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Please stay with us. So you're watching PM Express, and earlier I told you that the PURC has announced a reduction of utility tariffs. My guest tonight is Ben Boache, who is the Executive Director of the Africa Center for Energy Policy. He has all the answers to the questions boggling your mind. Good evening to you, Ben.
Good evening, Asha.
And thank you so much. Good to have you on PM Express. It's been a while.
And welcome to our office.
Great.
Yes. I hope you can do it more from here.
It's a whole new feeling.
Yes.
But how does it come across to you, a reduction or an announcement of a reduction in tariffs? I mean, from residential to non-residential to mines and what have you?
No, I mean, we are cautiously excited about this reduction. Consistently, we have maintained that electricity in Ghana is too expensive. To ensure that there is industrial competitiveness and that there is productivity in the country, the primary energy like electricity has to be affordable. But that hasn't been the case. If you compare Ghana's tariff with the sub-regional average, we're doing way above it, and therefore that made Ghana uncompetitive if investors were looking at electricity to come to Ghana. The tariff was just too high. We also had this ambitious policy of selling power to the region, where our price actually didn't allow us to do that. So consistently we maintained that we needed to reduce the tariff to ensure that the country is competitive, to ensure that we can engineer industrial growth, and ensure that consumers in general would be happy with the tariff that they're paying. So it's in order to see PURC acting to respond to that call over the years. But we are cautious because over the years we know why electricity is so expensive in Ghana. There are variables that contribute to the cost of electricity. The cost of generating the electricity itself is primary to how electricity is computed. And then also, when the electricity is generated, how you distribute it and the losses that comes along also affect what kind of tariff you have. We see ECG losing almost 30% of what is given them. So if you give them, say, 1 million worth of power, they are losing about close to 300,000. Okay. So that margin has to be accounted for, and usually it's the consumer that pays for that losses. So to be able to re-engineer the tariff, you have to ensure that one, the generation cost can come down, and also to ensure that that inefficiency, that distribution losses can also go down to pass on some relief to the consumer. So we were hoping that PURC would do that, and then also the utilities will up their game to ensure that those variables favorably account for the need or the changes that we are seeing. So we have been told by the PURC that that is what they have actually done. Government, you recall, late in, last year, indicated that from what they had done, the negotiations they had with the utilities, the power generators, and also on fuel, they see a possible reduction of about 14%.
Right, I remember.
Yes, for the consumer. And we were pushing that government could come clean with the numbers as to what they have actually negotiated, so that we can do the analysis. We never got it. PURC also never published the proposals from government. We all submitted proposals for PURC to consider, which they did and published on their website. But we haven't still seen the proposal from government for us to be part of that analysis to see whether this reduction is of any merit or they just kowtow into the demands of government, to reduce the tariff. So we have to be careful how we're doing things to ensure that we don't engineer another load shedding in Ghana.
Okay, exactly the point I was making. But let's look at residential customers who will have a reduction of 17.5%, and non-residential customers 30%. The mines have 10%, and then customers with special load tariffs enjoying 25% reduction. But if you look at what PURC considered, I know they consider forex, they consider inflation, and all of these come into actually determining what kind of reduction to give. And so if you look at all of these, and people think that this is not realistic, how realistic is this reduction from where you sit?
I think we are not able to tell how realistic it is, because they haven't made the figures available. The variables that went into the calculations, we don't know. But we do know that the reduction is making Ghana more competitive.
Okay.
The reduction is going to allow industry to have some breathing space, because people were just paying too much for electricity, and it was actually killing industry and businesses. So once you pass on relief to them, that allows them to be more productive, that allows them to expand their production, and that also creates jobs, because once there is more production, you need more hands, you need more people to manage it, and ultimately you boost the economy. So that we are short of, but we don't know exactly what went into it. We have been given hints.
But you were part of the stakeholder meeting that led to this reduction.
Yeah, so at the stakeholder meeting, we had other stakeholders come in to present what they thought was the right thing to do.
What were some of the proposals that were made?
Yes, I mean, all the utilities were actually asking for more tariffs, but obviously that is what they have to do.
I know government wanted a 14%.
Yes, but government's proposal was never shared, and that is where we have a difficulty. If we want to be transparent, let's be transparent across the board. If you go to PURC's website today, you will see all the proposals that were submitted by ASEP, by AGI, by the universities, by Electoral Commission, and all the other stakeholders who submitted, except that of government and the utilities. So for us to be fair, you need to have all the submissions published, and then also what went into the analysis, what actually you have seen to be the new cost for fuel. We are told that they renegotiated some of the capacity charges, which is positive, but we don't know by how much. So if we know all those figures, then we can see the sustainability of what is gone into the computation of the tariff reduction. But we don't know, except to say that the numbers look good for industry, it looks good for domestic consumers, and improves on Ghana's competitiveness.
But what was ASEP's proposal?
Our proposal largely was to hint at the key challenges in the sector, and also to alert PURC on the issues that I'm saying, that the tariffs are expensive because of the kind of contracts we negotiated, the kind of power plants that we have in the system. Okay. So if they're going to be able to pass on relief, then they have to pay attention to going back to the negotiation table to renegotiate with the utilities and the generators, and also ensuring that ECG will up its game, to reduce the losses.
Sure.
But ultimately, we were saying that there has to be a way to reduce the tariff, because, like I mentioned, we are seeking to export power, and as I speak, there is excess generation capacity.
Okay.
And once you have excess generation capacity, and you are not utilizing that excess, you have to pay for it. Okay. So it is better to get something for the power that is in excess than nothing. Okay. So you rather reduce the tariff, improve on consumption, so that people will pay for the excess capacity, rather than it idling and government going to find resources to pay for it. So those are some of the reasons why we thought that it should come down.
But one of the arguments I've had is to do with the generation mix, and of course we know that we're getting gas from various sources, even though we're told that so I think yesterday we had information that we're cutting gas supply from Nigeria because we have enough gas from Ghana Gas and other sources to adequately support us. But we also know that the energy sector debt is pending. We know that VRA is still indebted. ECG has managed to pay. And so all of these put together, do you think it's a good move to reduce tariffs at this critical moment?
Yes, I think if you switch from crude oil to gas, that gives you a lot of savings. Because one, gas is more efficient, it's cheaper comparatively. And beyond that also, the shutdown periods or the interval within which you do maintenance and servicing is longer than using crude oil. If you're using crude oil, assuming you're even paying the same price for crude oil and gas, you have to shut down more frequently for light crude oil than you would do for gas. So your maintenance cost is reduced. So gas is very important if you want to reduce the tariff. So we are happy that we are now ensuring that we have enough gas for generation. We still have challenges with Nigeria gas. I think the excuse I've heard is that there are still some challenges with supply from Nigeria, and I don't know how that would help us sustain our switch to 100% gas, because we still need Nigeria gas to augment our domestic gas, beyond which we cannot power all our plants. Right. So Nigeria gas is at this point very critical for Ghana. So those are the dynamics. If we're able to 100% maintain gas for power, then it's good on us, and that will help stabilize the electricity tariff, because that also is very important, because gas prices are usually negotiated over a long term. So that brings some level of stability rather than crude oil, which fluctuates very often on the international market. So if we have gas consistently supplied to the power plants, that brings that stability, and you could go 3-4 years without having to review your tariff if you can also stabilize the currency.
That would be great.
You know, so good news if we're able to maintain gas supply to power.
Then talking about sustenance and also getting to know that with power generation is what you produce is what you supply. And since we're now enjoying gas supply from other sources, and we think, and you rightly said that you don't think it's we can do without Nigeria forever, how long are we going to enjoy this situation? Is it going to be forever, or we may get to a point and then we'll have to come back and start all over again?
No, I think the government has plans. We have also seen attempts to bring in LNG, for example, you know, so that we have that buffer, we have that stability in the supply of gas. If that move is sanctioned properly and ensure that that price is also competitive, then of course we can have the relief and the stability that we want. Our concern really has been the LNG price and the fact that it's also pegged against crude oil. That is where the difficulty could be. But if we can have a better pricing mechanism for the LNG, that could come in to stabilize the price, and that could ensure that Ghana operates in a very competitive arena for a long haul.
All right, so you're still watching PM Express. Ben Boache is Executive Director of Africa Center for Energy Policy. He's been sharing some very interesting ideas with us, and he thinks that we can't do away with Nigeria gas forever. And this situation we're in, we need to put in measures to sustain it. Otherwise, we would have to go back again and start from point zero. This is PM Express. We'll take a break. When we come back, a lot more to share. Welcome back, PM Express. We're discussing a reduction in utility tariffs, and we're told that residential customers are getting 17.5% reduction. We're told that the non-residential customers are getting 30% reduction, and then the mines have 10%, and then customers with special load tariffs are enjoying 25%. And we're looking at how realistic this is. And Ben Boache has been making some very interesting inputs in there. Now, let's look at the issue of debt with VRA, ECG. And I mentioned it.
Even before that, we can look at the percentages that are allocated.
The percentage, yes.
The domestic industry. And
exactly. We'll come to that, but let's look at the ECG. That's the main energy supplier. And then let's look at VRA. We know that the debts are the main challenges we've had over the years. And the reason I'm saying this is because in all these years, when we've had to pay very expensive costs for energy or for power supply, we're told that ECG is owing VRA, government is owing ECG, VRA is owing gas and crude oil suppliers, and so the circle goes on. Now that we've come to this stage, we're saying that we have enough supply of gas or crude, and so we're having, we're enjoying a free period now, so we're having this kind of reduction. I remember that not long ago, ASEP warned that if we're not careful, we may go back to the days of darkness. How do we manage this whole thing so we don't go back to the days of darkness? And again, do you still even hold that perception that we may go back to darkness?
No, I think we haven't in recent times said that we're going to go into darkness. But I mean, as far as the debt situation is concerned, we always warned that we shouldn't put the sector in a position that will return us into that distress situation. Government's approach currently is to pay off the debt through the raising of bonds, and then that gives the utilities a clean slate, a clean balance sheet that allows them to operate like any sound business entity. So that is the approach that government has taken. And to pay off the debt, consumers are being charged, to be able to repay through the petroleum product sales, and then also on electricity. So there is arrangement, separate arrangement to pay off the debt of the utilities. Okay. So once the bond is raised and settles the utilities, that gives them that room, unlike they used to be, where they couldn't raise any financial capital from the financial market to operate. Now they can do so because they don't have the debt sitting on their books. So that arrangement, if it works well, we shouldn't see the re-emergence of the distress situation that we had in the past. But I think ultimately what PURC needs to do is that at all times we will be paying cost-reflective tariffs. And we are happy that they are talking about renegotiating the cost of generating, renegotiating gas prices, so that they can pass those reliefs rather than attacking the profitability of the business. And I think those are the appropriate decisions that you can hope for.
Okay, so earlier you talked about the percentages, and I'm now coming to that. We know 17.5 for residential customers, 30% for non-residential, 10% for mines, and then customers of special tariffs, 25%. I mean, if you look at the breakdown, what does it mean? Let's start with the residential, 17.5% for the residential. I would have thought that it should have given us more, because I know the TUC even was requesting for 20%. How come they give us this? Is it enough for us?
Yeah, I've seen the TUC proposal. They thought we could do 20% because workers are struggling, but PURC would look at the numbers. They will look at the feasibility of the numbers, taking into account all the variables that goes into computing the tariff. So that is not just putting out a magic number, but rather looking at the numbers. And I think the fact that we are now seeing a bigger reduction for industry and for business as against that of domestic consumers, yes, for us it's refreshing. To the extent that we now allowing industry the space, to be able to operate and create employment and also expand their businesses. That is welcome, because everywhere you wouldn't see industry subsidizing domestic consumers. Domestic consumers rather pay more to subsidize industry, but it's the reverse in Ghana. And I think this sets the pace for us to realign the sector to ensure that we can rather pass on the relief to industrial consumers who rather employ those of us sitting at home. You know, because if you don't have a job, you will be sitting at home whether the electricity is free or not. They wouldn't have any impact on your pocket.
But if you have a job and your monthly salary is not being increased and electricity tariff keep going up, what do you do?
Because at least you have income, which allows you to pay for your bill.
At a point in time, you may use half of your salary to buy electricity, and it is happening even right now.
No, but at least there's a reduction.
People spend 400 cedis, for instance, for electricity in a month. And so if you earn, let's say, 800 cedis in a month, already half of it is gone. So we're also thinking, even though it's welcoming to see 30% for the non-residential, we're also looking forward to something like 25% for residential customers.
I don't know what parameters you're looking at to arrive at the 25%. But again, I mean, if we get the numbers from PURC, we can, you know, turn our own numbers and see whether what they are giving us is realistic. But the point I was making is the fact that we need industry to be active, and that is how we can get employment. That is how we can get the economy functioning, and that's how we can get more people or businesses contributing to tax for development. And that is done everywhere in the world. So Ghana cannot do the reverse. You know, so to see PURC take the step to ensure that we can pass more relief to commercial consumers, that helps to improve on the economy. And if you look at these numbers, they look 17.5, 30%, 10%. But from the analysis we have done, you know, reflecting on what we were paying in 2015, in dollar terms, this translates to about 30 to 41% in reduction. Because if you check the dollar rate at the time, which is around 3.7, and now 4.4, which PURC used to do the computation, we are seeing in dollar terms about 31 to 41% in reduction, which is significant, you know, because the industry is run by dollar, really, not cedis. Even though they take the rates in cedis, dollar is what is used to buy all the inputs in the sector except salaries. So it's a significant reduction, and we're hoping that what the numbers they use is sustainable and can actually help the utilities to operate at that level.
If you look at the 25% given to customers of special tariffs, you think they deserve it?
Yes, I mean, these are customers who are buying electricity in bulk. You know, they consume higher, like industries, the steel companies, and they pay huge, you know, amounts, millions a month. You know, so if you give them 20%, if you are paying 2 million Ghana cedis electricity bill and you're giving 25% of that, that is huge. You know, almost 500,000 cedis reduction. That can expand the business. You know, that can ensure that they pay better salaries. That can ensure that they recruit more people into the business. So for me, that is a substantial reduction for industry.
You're talking about people paying huge, but how about the mines? They were giving just 10% off. You think they don't deserve more than 10%?
I don't know. I mean, maybe they didn't negotiate well, or maybe, I mean, I don't know what actually informed that decision, that disparity. Maybe because they have gold, I don't know. But PURC will be in a better position to explain why the disparity and why they rather got 10%. But I thought if they were in industry, they should also be treated as such, you know, as part of the industrial band, you know, to ensure that they can also be more active and produce more. But they only got 10%, which also translates to about 25% on the dollar rate. So it's also quite substantial.
So if you didn't know, you just had 17.5% reduction if you're a residential customer, and also non-residential customers are now having 30% reduction of electricity. We have the mines having 10% reduction, and customers with special tariffs having 25% reduction. And we're told that it's very good news, especially with non-residential customers who will also offer jobs to the people. And so if those people are having a reduction, it's only boost business, and he thinks it's good news. I'm still here at the Africa Center for Energy Policy, and I'm with Executive Director Ben Boakye, who's been sharing some very interesting ideas with us. We'll take another break on PM Express. When we come back, we're still discussing utility tariffs, reduction in utility tariffs. Welcome back to PM Express. We're still at the Africa Center for Energy Policy. Ben Boakye is our guest tonight. We're talking the announcement of reduction in tariffs by the PURC. Is it good news? Is it realistic? Ben Boakye has been saying that is good news, except that the PURC has not been open as to how they calculated the reduction. We're still waiting for those figures, and then we can make some meaning of this reduction. But let me come back to our energy generation mix and the sources of generation. And we know, and we've been told by experts, that hydro is the cheapest we have. Over the years, our consumption hasn't been up to the capacity we need, so we've had to go to gas, we've had to go to crude, and we know crude is very expensive. You pointed it out earlier. And it looks like now we're shifting from the traditional sources of power, and the reason why we've had to pay very expensive sum of money for, or very expensive prices for power in this country. How is our consumption doing? How is BUI doing? Are they not up to the level where we can now relieve this gas supply, crude supply, and go back to our traditional supply, so we can even get, lower, better reduction, if I may put it?
Let me say that Akosombo is the cheapest we have, not hydro, because you have about 3 cents per kilowatt hour cost of generation from Akosombo. But BUI has about 11 cents. Okay. So BUI is not cheap. BUI, even though hydro is quite expensive. Okay. And and largely because we have paid for the investment in Akosombo, so it's more of recurrent expenditure that we are incurring. I think government policy moving forward is to ensure that they can support industry with a cheaper power from Akosombo. If you check government position on integrated aluminium that they want to do, they're banking their hopes on Akosombo providing that base or that cheaper electricity for that kind of industrial exercise. So we have to appreciate that we don't have enough power from Akosombo. Akosombo at maximum can do about 1,080 megawatts of electricity. And if our consumption is in excess of 2,100 around this time, you have more than 50% reliance on more expensive generation systems, even if you're adding BUI to it. So we cannot continue to rely on Akosombo for cheaper power. So we have to pay for the thermal generations that we are adding on. So the best way to do it is to ensure that even at the thermal side, the cost of generation, the kind of contracts you sign, can also bring some value, so that you are not paying too much for the generation of power, and also how the power is distributed. You can improve on its efficiency to ensure that the cost is not too much for the consumer. If you're able to do that, we wouldn't worry whether it's thermal or hydro, but just to ensure that there is much efficiency in the sector.
One of the arguments has been the fact that, okay, you can't only blame ECG for not performing well. You should blame government, because government owes ECG so much. Government is not paying ECG. ECG is owing VRA, and so it's a cycle. Going forward, what should we do? How should we manage power in this country so we don't go back to square one? Because, of course, a lot of us are afraid of going back to the darkness.
Yeah, we blame ECG, we blame VRA, not because entirely they are to blame, but I mean, they are the ones that allow themselves to be micromanaged by government. We see the challenge hasn't been with the engineers and the management, but it's often because they are appointed by government, and therefore they do what government wants. The government appoints boards to manage the affairs of these institutions, and they tend to micromanage them, you know, the way they want. And that has been the problem over the years, and the reasons why ECG and VRA has underperformed. If we introduce sound corporate governance systems into these institutions and allow that the board, for example, would appoint a CEO and ensure that they can extract performance from these heads of the institutions, then they can also, based on those sound corporate governance principles, deliver. But if somebody is appointed and the person is not allowed to deliver what based on certain performance benchmarks, you know, and government continues to interfere with, they will interfere in the procurement processes, they will interfere in the day-to-day running of the institutions, then you cannot blame the individuals but government. And the ultimate responsibility has been on government, and that's why government is taking the steps to remedy the problem, because over the years it's been government interference in these institutions that has brought them where they are today. One of the steps has been to introduce the private sector into the distribution of power, and we do know the challenge we've had with the attempt to put ECG in the hands of the private capital or private sector through the concession arrangement. Yes. So we have to ensure that that process can go on. It can go on by addressing all the challenges that we have with workers understanding, you know, the modalities involved, and also ensuring that there are clear performance benchmarks for whoever will take over ECG to ensure that they will deliver. You know, we cannot just hand such an asset to a company that is not prepared, or a company that doesn't have the capacity to deliver the good service that we want, and also to ensure that we can reduce the losses and be more efficient. And ultimately, I mean, for us, what we are interested in is the fact that the control of government will be reduced, or because there is private capital or private sector involvement. If we continue to leave it in the hands of government, even if one government decides not to interfere, another government may decide to interfere, and we'll go back to square one.
So for you, I mean, handing ECG,
we should find a way to introduce the private sector into
it's very important.
It's very important, yes.
Well, many thanks to you. Ben Boakye is Executive Director of Africa Center for Energy Policy, and you heard him, he said it right. He said it's very good news we're having reduction. We haven't had this for a very long time. It's good news we're having it now, but how do we sustain this? He says we need to find a way to get ECG off government hands. Otherwise, we'll still go on and come back to square one. This is PM Express, and it's been exciting having it outside the studio. It's been wonderful speaking with you, Ben Boakye. Thanks so much for joining us on PM Express. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. We'll be here to do it all over again, God willing, tomorrow. Many thanks for watching. Have a good night.